out on the field, the feeling I feel when I'm living my life for what's real. Make America healthy, feeling like it's time for a change. We're going back to common sense, making America healthy again. We're going back to common sense, making America healthy again. We're going back up healthy again.
All right. What's up, fam? How we feeling today?
Hey, boys.
What's going on, guys?
Feeling good. Been on the grind.
Good to see everyone.
Yeah, it's good.
It's going to be we got a little bit of a skeleton crew running tonight, but it's going to be great.
Club Maha B team. What up?
Yeah. Ian is becoming Candace Owens, so Ian's going to be out for, I think, this week. I think he's back next week. Next week, I'm kind of excited. This week's cool, too, with the military. But next week, we have the chemtrails guy. Just in prep for that. Spent an hour on the phone prepping, and my mind was blown. I had all
Billy,
my
you were freaking out in our group chat, man. It was really, really funny and interesting to watch.
It's going to be great. People who don't believe, people who believe, both are going to have their minds warped with what this guy says. So that's next week.
Everybody knows it's real, don't they? But we need these. I'm looking forward to that.
Not everybody does. Truly.
No, I still have people that call me crazy.
For sure. That think they stop trusting everything else we say the second we give that any credence, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
I mean, at the core, I mean, what's his name? Who is going to be joining us next week?
Jim Lee.
I knew it was Lee. Jim Lee. Yeah, Jim Lee. And he is one of like the major voices and one of the major kind of like researchers and speakers on the whole geoengineering topic. So that's going to be next week. That's going to be great. And, and tonight we have an awesome guest. Comes from military background. We're going to be delving deep into, into making the America military healthy again. Because I know from from touring around the country as part of the campaign, meeting with vets, there's a lot of issues, from the injections that are forced upon them and the using the armed forces as guinea pigs in some cases, to the food that's being dished out on in the field, but also on the bases, how there's contracts being delivered to some of the larger fast food vendors to come be supplying
it's gross, man. I've been on bases before, and you'll see Burger King right there, and it's like the only restaurant I see on base will be like some stupid drive-through fast food.
We'll get into that when
Sam Shoemate.
Sam Shoemate.
At Samosor.
At Samosor. Yeah, it's at Sam. So Sam will be joining us in a couple of minutes. Stoked to bring him up. But before that, guys, there's been some kind of happening. I've got this American values thread here that I was just going to bring up and, kind of go over wow, what a week it's been.
Let's blast through it real quick. There's just some nice little updates, man.
So, I mean, obviously this has been the first 100 days of the Trump administration. Bobby wasn't quite confirmed, right out the gates. It took a little bit of time, but, he has been very, very, very kind of active. He's just showing up on Dr. Phil talking about banning pharmaceutical ads, which we've discussed a little bit. I personally I'm definitely in favor of reducing it because it's it's very aggressive advertising, but at the core, I don't know if just banning the ads will solve the regular or the industry capture that they have in Canada. You don't have pharmaceutical ads like they do.
The issue with pharmaceutical ads, or one of the big issues with pharmaceutical ads, is that because of the amount of money they spend on it, they actually have editorial control on the channels where they're spending this money.
Exactly.
And this is extremely problematic. They spend billions of dollars on advertising, and then they can dictate to some degree what these platforms can even talk about. And then I thought Bobby made an interesting point, that when they're advertising these products, it's generally not the people they're advertising to that's paying for it. It's the American taxpayer that's paying for these products. And so is that even appropriate?
Indeed. So here's Bobby, like he was on the Dr. Phil show, and here's him kind of outlining his top priorities. Let's give a listen.
If you had a number one priority that is top of your list right now, what would it be with 30 seconds left before we go off air?
And I have getting the bad ingredients out of food, making sure the vaccines are safe, making sure baby formula is safe and is available. And I would say those are three of my top priorities.
Okay.
Pretty good. Pretty good. You know, on
It's a good start.
You know, on the baby formula, we kind of took that. I went ahead and made some merch actually, specifically for
The Operation Stork Speed.
Operation Stork Speed. So let me just share this tab. So this is Operation Stork Speed. I've my daughter, who's just turned 1, is absolutely adorable in this, and I got one for Mama too. Let's make baby food healthy again.
Okay, now Kyle, those onesies, do we have those in adult male sizes?
No, not yet. Not yet. And
Missed opportunity, bro.
We are putting out feelers with the Sanders campaign to see if he'll comment or endorse removing harmful chemicals from baby food. I feel like that's something like he'd be down, but I think he also plays that politician kind of angle of you say yes, I say no. So anyhow.
Yeah, he was into that. What was he doing with the onesie when Kennedy was getting confirmed? He was mad the Children's Health Defense was selling a onesie. What did it say?
It said the one was like unvaxxed and unafraid.
All right.
And there's we ended up buying a bunch of those too. One of them said "Pharma is not my mama." Be cute, and yeah, Children's Health Defense. I think they sold like 500 of those onesies. Like in that following week, it was their
Streisand effect thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It makes sense. Fearless, unafraid. The fearmongers would be upset about that. So that's funny. They went after that.
Yeah, they don't like that.
Got a little comment here. Is the video frozen for anybody else? Rhett, you see us? Is it working? Give us drop a quick comment, guys, if just to make sure everything's looking good on the outside. But while that happens, let's just go to the kind of the next thing. We're changing the ingredients, guys. It's happening.
This is PepsiCo, man. Did you hear about this? Pepsi has announced that they are going natural for their ingredients. And I'm still not really going to trust PepsiCo products because even if the ingredients on the label seem better, you're still talking about massive industrial scale. And, even if they hit some bullet points, it'll still be the lowest common denominator at that level. Having this big company make this move is a pretty big move.
I mean, I got a frozen pizza the other day from DiGiorno. I'm not too proud about it. It was a rising crust pizza, and on the back it was like our regenerative farming commitment. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is like a little Nestle company is like the company that's on top of it. And this is kind of like similar to like greenwashing, where it's going to be trendy to be regenerative, and there's I don't believe there's any real true certifications or standards. And these large companies, they can pop up a subsidiary or like an action group that they can then donate money to and celebrate the fact that they're donating money to their own group, but it's got a good name on it.
I hate that.
Dude, I got something on this soda topic here. There's other countries, the Diet Coke will be like with stevia, and here in our country, the Diet Coke is with aspartame. Now, this is
Aspartame.
a known carcinogen, and it just seems like, what is going on with everybody pushing this Diet Coke? I mean, this is literally GMO E. coli, and it's a waste product where the aspartame is coming from, believe it or not. So it's like, bro, we're eating GMO worm shit or GMO germ shit. How is this what people are pushing and getting excited
Dude,
about? So
what bothers me the most is when I see foreign companies selling us a product that's full of poison, and every other market a product that's not full of poison, but they're both produced in their home country. So they literally have like a special factory just to produce toxic food for Americans.
it's so crazy. And just
Yeah.
to put a bow on this stevia point, stevia is a plant, right? So you talk about natural ingredients. This is a plant that Japan, the healthiest country in the planet, they've been eating this forever. It's in a lot of the food they're eating, and it took forever for us to get it. Meanwhile, we got aspartame, but they were saying, I think until about 10 years ago, we couldn't have stevia in our food. So it's good to see this change.
It is bizarre. And by the way, you can just get a stevia plant. The leaf itself, you just take it and muddle it a little bit and toss it on your tongue, and like boom, it's that sweet flavor.
Yeah, it's like a candy plant. It's delicious. Your kids may eat the whole
cane
thing.
sugar too, right? Like, delicious down here in
Oh, I mean,
Florida.
like real cane sugar, like not processed white sugar with bone char, but turbinado sugar. That still has what would be molasses if you separate it out. That still has the nutrients in it.
Yeah, I remember. I mean, down here in Florida, there's a huge industry of cane sugar farming. We were driving over to Palm Beach. I think it was we were in the bus, and I made a wrong turn, and I found myself on like a little farm road. And I was like, damn, look at these plants all around. I'm like, that looks like cane sugar. And sure enough, got out, broke one off, and man, it was delicious.
Yeah, and the thing is, the sugar cane plant does have nutrients in it. It's just when we're eating cane sugar, that's all been processed out, so it's just the sweet.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's just quickly kind of rip through because
Yep. And I think Sam, if you check, he might be in the back room now.
Sam is here, and
great.
So just stand by. Sam, if you want to, while we're just going through these last things, if you want to connect your X and broadcast out to your community, you should be able to add the destination in the top right corner. If you want, you're invited to. No obligation or expectation, simply an invitation. All right, then we've got Florida banning drink fluoride. Yeah, we talked a little about that last week. Big time. Ain't no need for that fluoride in the water.
This one was crazy. I don't really know anything about this.
Let's listen to what Bobby has to say.
All right.
And HHS as the role as the principal vector in this country for child trafficking. And during the Biden administration, HHS became a collaborator in child trafficking and for sex and for slavery. And we have ended that, and we're very aggressively going out and trying to find these children, 300,000 children that were lost by the Biden administration.
So, dude, he dropped this statement, and I have seen like nobody talk about it. I've seen no extra details. What?
Trump said he was going to be making a really big announcement this week. But it wasn't relating to trade or tariffs. But it was going to be just massive. Let's see.
Well, he removed nomination for Jeanette Nashwat as Attorney General or Surgeon General and named who?
Casey Means.
Dr. Casey Means. And the reason why he removed her, there was questions about her medical education, which Dr. Casey Means has a similar thing. If you dig a little deep, it goes a little deep here. On the Tucker Carlson interview back in August of 24, which is when most people, including me, even found out about these people. However, the grassroots movement within health freedom thinks this brother and sister kind of came out of nowhere, appeared on the scene. Casey goes through and outlines that in her 5th year, she dropped her scalpel on the desk and quit in protest of what's going on in the medical world. On that podcast, Tucker outlines, basically saying you drop that on the desk at Stanford, and she didn't go to Stanford and it wasn't corrected. So there's some interesting stuff going on in the underbelly of the Callie and Casey Means story. And so there's stuff that you see out in the mainstream, and there's everything else. And I like the conspiracy side of things. There's a gentleman named Jack Cruz, spelled with a K. You can investigate him. He's the guy who doesn't wear things in his ears because he knows they cause cancer. He wears the yellow glasses because he knows the blue light kills your brain. He got into a pretty heated argument with Callie on the Danny Jones podcast from a couple months ago that I urge everybody to check out if you want to dig into a little deeper into like the other side of Callie and Casey Means. So Callie is a special advisor to RFK Jr. At NIH. So they're both coming from, kind of an elusive background. A lot of their older posts have been removed from X, but now they're kind of, their mother passed away really fast from pancreatic cancer, 12 days from diagnosed to passed away. They wrote a book called Good Energy, The Surprising Connection Between Metabolism and Limitless Health. I think it became a #1 bestseller. So they kind of coming after the food and medicine and pharma all at the same time. So they seem like they're doing good stuff, but they do have this underbelly of stuff coming at them. And so I kind of look at both. That's another big piece this week. Casey, Surgeon General nomination.
And Bobby credits like his decision to even join Trump was really like, Callie and Casey Means were like pushed him kind of over the edge. So
I'll give credit to Callie in that interview though. It was his idea. Not that many people want to take a critic on for 2-3 hours and really kind of go through all the weeds with them. So I think that was pretty stand up, and I wish Dr. Cruz would have been just a little more kind of ready for a conversation rather than just trying to chide him. So
I totally agree with you. It was kind of uncomfortable watching that. To be honest with you, I think it could have been, and you could see Danny almost lost control of the podcast. He's like, can we just talk here a little bit? It was a very interesting podcast, but
and
this
Callie
show we're
is
going to talk about it all.
And Callie is like, he is an excellent speaker and he knows how to, handle reporters. He is a tremendous communicator, very, very well trained.
He handles himself very well.
He always looks good. Damo, your temperature okay there, buddy? Just making sure.
Oh yeah, just the lower temps, huh? 98.6.
All right. Well, with no further ado, let's bring up Sam here. Sam, welcome to the Club Maha podcast. How are we doing, buddy?
Good. Well, thanks for having me on. This will be fun.
Yeah, this should be great. And for anybody who wants to follow Sam on his socials. It's Samasaur. Is that how you pronounce it?
You did. Just like a dinosaur. Samasaur.
So Sam, welcome. You want to just introduce yourself to everybody here? And
hey, what's going on, guys? So I guess I'm on this show. I met Damo the other day. Doing a show with another guy that I know, Uncensored Health, or probably got his handle wrong. But anyways, I spent 21 years in the Army, and the last 5 years, to include the last 3.5 that I was in the military, I was doing a lot of activism and whistleblower work and stuff like that. And so when it comes to health in the military, I wouldn't say that's the primary thing I focused on, but it is something I'm extremely familiar with, not only from the standpoint of what I was involved in strongly, which was the COVID mandate, but also just existing within the military. I've been in every type of unit you can imagine, from to support units, to infantry units, to every echelon, special operations units, you name it. But anyways, I've seen the full gamut of what the what the military has to offer as far as what our services are producing these days. And I'll just be blunt with you. We have an epidemic of obesity. It's not a little bit of obesity. It's not, hey, we've got some fat people here and there and they need to go to, fat camp and lose a few pounds. I'm talking about a full-blown epidemic of obesity. To include one of, Military Times, this is, if you look this up, I didn't have it pulled up, but Military Times did an article not too long ago about how the fat rate, what do you call that? What do you call
body mass, BMI?
Yeah, the BMI. BMI was changed for males to 26% and for females to 33%. And they
increased the number.
Yes, they increased the number, and they're allowing males all the way up to 45% to join the military. They have to go to a preparatory course first to try to lose some of that. But they're allowing males all the way up to 45% BMI to go into the military because we're at a loss here for what we do. We have like 17% of the nation is eligible to even be recruited for so many issues, from mental health to physical health to everything else. And so they don't know how to recruit.
Yeah. Bobby was saying that like 70% of the nation's youth don't even qualify.
Yeah.
And it sounds like and it sounds like that's the case, even though they expanded the qualifications.
Yeah.
By the way, raising the BMI to allow people to keep joining reminds me of how they keep changing the definition of a recession to tell us that we're not in one.
Yeah.
And they keep changing the formula for inflation. Like, they started removing things from the inflation calculation that are like energy and housing. And they're like, no, it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
And so, like, and some of the other topics of this too, it's like, Trump talks about the American military being the best military, the strongest military, like, on the planet. Like, is that true? Like, if the health of the actual troops is not there, I mean, we have the best technology and, may have the best, gamers in the background controlling a lot of, like, the autonomous tools and weapons, but at the core, like, our people, our soldiers, how do you feel, Sam?
So I am highly critical of the Pentagon, and let me make this very clear for anybody who doesn't know me and my standpoint. I am highly critical of the Pentagon and the DoD for a lot of reasons, mainly because they've broken the law at will for the last several years without any accountability. But beyond that, very critical of a lot of things they do. But as far as the troops, we have, regardless of what I just said about the obesity epidemic, you got to keep in mind we have millions of troops. We still have, hands down, the best military and the best troops out there. Our military is still unequaled, second to none. But as generations cycle out, because most of your troops are only in for 4 years, they're only doing one enlistment. So as that continues to roll and we keep having these issues with the quality of citizens that are able to even come into the military, we're going to keep seeing less and less of those quality troops. And I'll give you a quick example. This is when I was truly shocked. I'd been in the Army about 16 or 17 years at this point, and I didn't realize how bad it was until I started doing some of this activism work. I was seeing a lot of stuff, and I was genuinely disgusted by where I was at. I was seeing a lot of fat troops, but I really didn't have a full gauge and bearing on where it was at. But I had a soldier in my unit who looked like the all-American guy. He wasn't fat, no issue whatsoever. However, this guy couldn't pass a physical fitness test. And I couldn't figure it out because he looked like there should be no issue. Well, I got to talking to him, and what they had done was they had passed him through basic training without passing a physical fitness test, which I found out was all too common. They did a lot of this, especially during the COVID years. But he had never passed the physical fitness test through advanced individual training, basic training, And when he got to his unit, he had stress fractures and all these other things. And I asked him, I said, what's going on? Well, come to find out, this kid had never done sports in his life. He had never done anything physical in his entire life. So sure, he wasn't fat, but he had no musculoskeletal strength whatsoever in his body. The first time he had ever been presented with anything physical was basic training. He played video games his entire life, like so many other kids of this generation, and he had never done anything to develop his body. And you simply can't turn that into something in a 9-week course in basic training and suddenly make him a specimen. It doesn't work like that. And so the kid was a good kid. He wanted to be better. He wanted to do better, but he just didn't have it. And unfortunately, we failed him in the military because we allowed him to go through all of these courses and land somewhere, and his body was destroyed. Like I said, he had stress fractures. He had all of these other issues in his body because his body was being torn down by the constant regimen of physical training. And I said, how far does this go? How far does this really stretch? Well, as I started digging into this, investigating it, and going further across the DoD, I found that this was a more and more common occurrence. Not just obesity, but people that just physically could not do athletic things. So
That's insane,
that answers
man.
your question. Yeah.
It does. While you were talking, I kind of had this funny thought, and tell me if there's anything to this. Is part of the reason that our military is sort of the best trained because we stay in active conflicts? Like, do we stay in active conflicts in part to maintain the level of our training?
Well, I mean, I don't think one equals the other. I think we had some of the most highly trained troops because of the constant conflicts, but I don't think we stayed in those conflicts to maintain the proficiency of those troops. When we came in, when we kicked off the wars, I remember because I came in 2002. And so I'm a new guy. I don't know what came before that. And I quickly learned that there was a huge gap. Basically, our military has not transformed how it does business since World War II. Okay. So we've gone through all these different wars, Korean War, Vietnam War, all these things. And we've gone into the jungle, we've gone here and there, but we've never changed how we actually operate since World War II, the way we do logistics and everything else, and the way we have our formations established and everything else. So when we got into the invasion to go in Iraq and Afghanistan, we were still fighting like Vietnam, but doing business like World War II. If that makes sense. And we had a lot of smart people and a lot of engaged people that were very energetic about transforming the military and making it this elite fighting force. And we got that. And then at some point we purged all those people. We kicked them out because we had to withdraw the forces. And then we decided that we were going to build it back up again during the Trump years. And then we tore it back down again. And it's just been this roller coaster and all this nonsense. But during that whole time, we've degraded the force by allowing discipline to degrade. Discipline has turned into the lack of NCOs and even officers to discipline the troops in a lot of cases and push them to excel. And then we've allowed more and more. And the unfortunate reality is USAREC. So, USAREC is the Army's U.S. Army Recruiting Command. And I can't speak for the other recruiting commands, but I can tell you there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind closed doors with USAREC, where they are flubbing numbers and they are making things happen that Congress doesn't even know about to make those numbers work. And the fact that USAREC got hit so hard, along with the other recruiting commands and the other branches, to make numbers, because you got to keep in mind, the last 2 years was the first time in our all-volunteer force since 1973 that we failed to make mission. All the branches besides the Marine Corps failed to meet their recruiting demands. So now they're talking about how they're meeting those recruiting demands. And that actually started before Trump came into office. We started picking those numbers up. But there was an issue for a long time where those numbers were being flubbed, and they were basically playing a shell game where they were, what is the saying? Paying
Robbing Peter to pay
Yeah,
Paul.
robbing Peter to pay Paul. Thanks. There you go.
Yeah.
And that's what they were doing with these MEPS troops that they had in delayed entry program, where they were taking these guys in delayed entry and they were basically shuffling the numbers around so they could try to get the numbers looking better in front of Congress. And so now we have a higher crop, but now we're finding that they're, like I said, they're allowing guys in with 45% BMI, and a lot of them are failing to get that off in prep school. They have this prep school, the training commands now, and it's not working because you're allowing such demonstrably bad numbers of, like I said, 45% BMI, that you can't do anything with that in any short period of time. What are you going to do with that kind of body mass index? I mean, that's years of work to get that off. And
one of my I have a number of people come to my business over the past year. One of them just today, swamped, very busy, can only do one thing at a time. And I talked to him multiple times. I said, don't you have a son? He goes, yeah, man, I can't get my son to do anything. I said, how old is he? He said 35. And this guy's a little older, working like hard work. I said, he's 35 and he won't work with you. I was like, you could just send him he could get, pretty good income. He goes, my son could kill it. He's 35. He stays home, plays video games and smoke weed. And we sat there and talked for about another 10 minutes on this generation. I grew up and I was working at 13, 14 years old. And I just remember working at a restaurant at 14 years old, like 20 hours a week. Like I was like, it was like child labor, but I wanted those 20s to put on my bed and buy my own stuff. And I've been working ever since. And so there seems to be a kind of disease of lethargicism coming up, specifically under a certain age. So I want to start by saying I think that probably plays a part of it. I want to jump back for a second here and ask about what I consider my first foray into what I thought was the military overstepping. I want to see what you think about this. I just remember in Desert Storm, 1991, the Gulf War syndrome, and all of these inoculations kind of skewing the health of these troops. That was my first foray into medicine can hurt, that I can really muster up from my youth. Does your knowledge go back that far? Do you kind of go back and understand kind of what the military did then, and have they done certain things like that, and are they trying to clean that stuff up?
I do, to a certain degree. I have friends that could speak to it a lot more intelligently than me. This has been a big part of our fight, is understanding how far back the DoD has gone, because as we fought back against this COVID mandate that we had in the military, both due to its unlawfulness, but then when we found out the harm that it was doing to service members, we really went back and we started to look at some of these things. And like I said, there's other people who can speak better to it than me, but we looked at things like, I can't remember the name they gave for it, but back when they gave the population of Black folks syphilis, to test syphilis on them. And then you had Agent Orange in Vietnam, and like you said, Gulf War syndrome, and all these other factors, and these inoculations. And then you had the anthrax shot, the anthrax shot was the exact same thing as the COVID shot. Now, it was not FDA approved. They forced service members to take it anyways. They lost the lawsuit and they continued to do it anyways. And then it was eventually FDA approved. But you realize that the DoD has used its service members as a test bed for drugs for years. And so what we looked at, there was a test that happened with that Pfizer had an agreement with the COVID mandate, and basically all EUA inoculated DoD service members and their families were entered into a study unbeknownst to them. And I have all the documentation. We made plenty of documentaries on it and videos and everything else, but unbeknownst to them, they were entered into a study where all of that test data was handed over to Pfizer. So you're talking about millions of service members, their families, and the DoD is handing over all of this test data for EUA COVID vaccines. And we said, why is this? you have the typical conspiracy theory where people say they're just trying to kill everybody. They're trying to purge and they're trying to, and I'm an analyst and I say, okay, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying that they're not trying to kill the world and to bring down the population. But what I am saying is I have to look at this more logically and say, no, what is the average person doing for this reason? Well, if you look at the DoD, you don't have any other test population in the world that you have more demographic information on, as far as their sex, their age, their ethnicity, their overall health, because you have all that stuff documented on all of them. So what better force in the world that is made up of multiple ethnicities, because other armies, you generally speaking, are primarily made up of one ethnicity or fairly close to it. But America, the melting pot, has all of these different ethnicities where you can test on all of these different populations of people and get accurate information back. And when we saw that and we realized what they were doing with the mandate, the whole idea behind this was to test mRNA on the most widely available body of data in the world. And so they were willing to do this unlawful thing. And then if you back that up and you say, well, that's probably the case with all of these other things that they've done. You know, they have all of this test data on the DoD, so why wouldn't they use it? And we can scream all day about how it's unlawful and it's legal and they're harming service members. At the end of the day, if nobody holds them accountable and we can't set up gallows in DC and hang these guys from the rafters so that everybody can see, then it doesn't matter. They'll just go on about doing their business. And so that's where we stand.
And who even can hold them accountable?
Right.
And there was a lot of talk too about, like, with what I'm hearing, like, because anthrax is not a virus. So like the anthrax vaccine is kind of like an intervention to create some sort of like, synthetic defense against some sort of synthetic compound. And like, could this mRNA like DARPA tech be actually going back like, to that time in like, this test? Cause it was I think it was like 5 jabs was.
So yeah, I think there was 6. Don't quote me on that. I know that I got about 9 of them because they lost my medical records so many times that I would go in there and be like, no, I already got number 4. And they'd be like, well, it doesn't show on your medical records, so you're getting another number 4. And that happened to me multiple times. So that's just, yeah. That's me
What's
being
interesting
a
to
fool
me,
and not keeping hard copies.
What's interesting to me is that the military and the aviation industry, pilots associations, seem to very early on, particularly in other countries, although the unions within the Pilots Association here in the States did find this out through various ways, that very early on, between February of 2021 and maybe mid 2021, particularly there's France did a study and found that those numerous issues from the vaccine, all of the things that we know now, myocarditis, pericarditis, they knew this. They had very good testing and data, but it seemed to be held down and not delivered to the public. Do you sense that in the military? Does it feel like
100%.
the troops are just kind of like, it doesn't matter, it's fine, you need to take your vaccine? Is that kind of part of the mandate there?
So my good friend, Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Teresa Long, is the #1 whistleblower in the entire DoD for all of this stuff. She blew the whistle on the DMED data back in I think it was 2022. DMED is the Defense Medical Epidemiology database that is basically the repository of all medical data for the entire Department of Defense. And when she got in there and started looking at this stuff, she saw that these numbers were skyrocketing. All right, so stick with me here and I'll try to be as concise as possible. She could obviously, as a doctor, speak about this a lot more intelligently than me. But anyway, she was a flight surgeon. She was a brigade surgeon at Fort Rucker, home of Army Aviation. And before she even saw that data, she started to see a very high volume of incidents among her pilot students right off the bat. So we know that in the FDA there is a law that says basically you can't fly for a certain period after you get a vaccine or an EUA drug of any kind, for the obvious reason that they don't want people flying aircraft with experimental drugs in them. But they basically threw that out the window with this, and we were screaming this from the rooftops from the very beginning. Like, you cannot be injecting our pilots with this stuff. It is an experimental drug. We do not have an FDA approved drug and all these other issues. And they did it anyways. So they suppressed that, knowing full well what they were doing. And they were violating FDA along with violating military regulations and federal statutes. But then when the DMED data came out, this is what's important. There's 2 incidents in my entire life, 2 incidents where I said, this is such a big deal, and these people are so powerful that the rules don't apply, and they just do whatever they have to do to suppress it. One of them was Epstein. They literally walked into the jail. They turned off the cameras. They told the guards to turn around. They killed him, and they said, oh, he hung himself. That was one. He was so important, and he was so dangerous to so many people that they just broke all the rules. They didn't even try to cover it up, and they went in there and killed him. And they said, oh, he killed himself. There's one. And the second one was the suppression of DMED data. When this stuff came out, there were multiple people that were fearful for their lives for what the implications of this would do. I'm talking, this showed unequivocally that some numbers were in the thousands of percentiles. And the DOD came out right away, and overnight, literally in the course of a weekend, they had articles already written in multiple outlets, traditional outlets that spew military propaganda for the DOD. Like, I can't even recall the outlet, but anyways, they had multiple outlets that came out and put these articles out that basically said the test data was flawed. The database, the DMED database was flawed. They brought down the whole database so they could go in there and correct the information. And the last 5 years of information that was used as a test bed was incorrect. It was flawed in some capacity. Well, here's the thing. When that test data was pulled, it was a totally arbitrary number. They pulled 5 years. The whistleblowers who pulled this stuff out pulled 5 years as a test, as a base, and then compared 2021 against that base. Totally arbitrary, totally subjective. 5 years. You could pick 10 years, 15 years. So it just so happened that 5 years was the corrupted time frame for this stuff. Everything else prior to that was okay. All the other DMED data was okay, but it just happened to be that 5 years. So they fixed it. And all of a sudden, all those numbers came down, and they brought the database back up. And since then, the database has been ruined forever. It's staggering what they did. The rules didn't apply, and they just went in there and they crushed it. Just like that, overnight.
And ultimately, who oversees that? Like, that's Department of Defense, right?
Yeah. So therein lies the other issue, and I've got to be careful what I say here. So Unisant is the company that oversees that data. If you look into Unisant, and if anybody's watching this, go start doing some deep dives on Unisant. It's spelled UNISSANT or something to that effect. And you'll find out that all of Unisant's holdings are in Asia, not China, Asia, India, Asia. So if you look at all of the heads, all of the executives of Unisant, they are all Indian names. And a lot of these organizations that are that do business with them route through these and what I thought was shell companies, because they just looked fake. I can't verify that or say that to any effect, but basically we started looking into Unisant, and it went nowhere. It just went to all these garbage holdings, and we couldn't make it. So we stopped looking into it. But we have since made it known to the new administration, specifically to Pete Hegseth's office, that this needs to be looked into because we are not in control of our own medical data. And if other folks are capable of not only looking at our troops' medical data, which is a national security issue, but they're capable of bringing it down and altering it and changing it on a whim, what does that say? This is a database that is supposed to be used by commanders to know what their troops' health is, to know what the health of their force is. And yet somebody else has the ability to go in there and change this on a whim. That is a national security risk.
I'm assuming like every soldier or personnel has a file within that database.
So this is how DMED works. DMED is like VAERS, but better. So VAERS, you go in and you input your own stuff. Anybody can, right? You have a medical incident, you go put it into VAERS. You can do that yourself. You can go submit a ticket to VAERS. DMED can only be input by medical providers within the Department of Defense. So that's, PAs, that's doctors, whoever. So when you go in, you have a broken arm. You go in for a broken arm and you get seen 3 times for a broken arm. You have 3 separate visits. That gets input into DMED 3 times. It's not how many incidents of this, it's how many times you were seen for that incident. So that's the catch here. So every time you go in for the flu, you went in twice, it gets input twice. What we saw with these numbers was myocarditis, for instance, went up into the 300th percentile. It was like 350% or something like that it skyrocketed. In fact, when I talked to a number of medical providers, there were numerous people that had never even dealt with or heard of myocarditis before because it was so uncommon. In fact, if you talk to what's the really famous Pete's, there's a doctor who's written more
Peter McCullough.
Yeah, Peter McCullough. Thank you. If you talk to Peter McCullough, he said at one point, and I believe, don't shoot me if I'm wrong on this, but I think he had dealt with only like 2 incidents of myocarditis his entire career until the vaccine. It was something like staggeringly low. Like it just didn't happen. It's not a common thing. And all of a sudden, he talks about how he started seeing it constantly all the time. It was the same thing in the military. There was these doctors that had never dealt with myocarditis, had never heard of it, especially in the military, in a healthy force, in a force that had already been screened coming into the military. Like myocarditis was not a thing. And all of a sudden they were getting numerous repeat incidents of service members coming in with myocarditis and all of these other pericarditis and strokes and Guillain-Barre syndrome and all this crazy stuff that they're like, we've never seen this in our lives. And all of a sudden you have the entire medical establishment in the military, they shift and they say, this is all because of COVID. It's all because of COVID. And they're like, well, that's crazy because in the year before the vaccine came out, we had COVID and we didn't see any of this. And then suddenly after the vaccine comes out, we start seeing this. So why didn't it happen in that year? Logically explain to me why it wouldn't occur in the year that we had COVID before a vaccine, but now it is suddenly off the charts. But it was all suppressed. And the whistleblowers that did come out and the doctors that did speak out against it were absolutely crushed in their careers. Crushed. I can't tell you how egregious and vile the entire medical establishment was to these doctors who questioned anything. If you questioned it as a nurse, as a doctor, a PA, you were done. Literally, you're getting supervised. You're being told to not talk about any issues with the vaccine with your patients, and just some wild stuff that happened in the military. And now it's an okay thing to talk about these issues to a certain degree, and they'll admit it. And there's 2 people in the Army, 2 people out of all this vaccine injured service members, 2 soldiers that have now been officially diagnosed with a COVID-19 vaccine related injury.
Do you know why that is?
Probably because of the pressure we put on them. I don't know.
Well, there's a vaccine. So in VAERS, it was under the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. It's called the VICP. What happened in COVID is they completely changed the method and the way that any injury would be compensated. It went to something called the Countermeasures Injury Compensation Program. Just think about that. For me, it literally went from a group of people that would investigate you, just like an investigative journalist or a medical investigator would look at your symptoms, look when you got the vaccine, look when you got your injury, look at the track record of what happened, look at your medical history, and then award you money. So for most people who don't know this, VAERS was started in 1986 under the Vaccine Injury Act. And from 1986 right up through COVID, we had the VICP. With COVID, they changed everything. They basically, it's not true, but I just use this to make people understand. They basically made it a military tribunal. There's a small group of people that are now in control of outlining injury. And we have the largest amount of injury ever from a vaccine. There's 19,000 reported deaths. That's even at 1%. That goes up to, hundreds of thousands, because VAERS is underreported by their own study in 2010 by upwards of 99%. And we have 1.5 million injuries. With the largest amount of injuries ever of all other vaccines combined, COVID beats it out. You add them all up, it's a 50-50. All other vaccines and COVID, we have the lowest payout ever because they changed the way we pay out. And that brings me up to another point that I wanted to bring up. 2 or 3 weeks ago, I watched an amazing podcast. I watch a lot, and I can't remember which podcast this was, but this lady stuck out to the point where I actually went back and watched it again. Her name, if you want to jot this down and go check it out, it's a great podcast. You'll be able to find it. She's kind of a legend right now in her own world. Her name's Captain Sherry Walker. She worked for United Airlines. She's one of the 593 pilots that got laid off for not getting the COVID vaccine. She started a nonprofit. She started collecting data. She started with all the data. She had anonymous pilots calling. She started collecting information from all these pilots. She basically is claiming now that the FAA has lowered the metrics for pilots, specifically electrocardiogram, the ECG parameters.
Right.
So
I remember
that
this.
pilots can now get in on weaker metrics. So their heart can be weaker and they can become pilots. And she was very concerned. She, I think it might've been Tucker. Was it Tucker? But yeah, I think it was Tucker. And Tucker said, I'm kind of scared of flying now. And she's like, yeah, I don't blame you.
Right.
That's kind of pointing to the same thing you're saying in the military. At this point, we're just lowering standards because we really have no choice at this point.
And I will say, before you continue, earlier when I was talking about pilots and regulation, I meant to say FAA, not FDA. So thank you for clarifying that.
And so, Sam, where we are today, 100 days in, Bobby Kennedy and Maha, do you feel hopeful, optimistic, still critical? Do you think there's room to address some of these great challenges? Do you feel like your voice is being heard more than it was before?
I was actually more aggressive before under the Biden administration, and I've lost a lot of that aggression. And there's other people who have picked up the fight. There's a lot of people in this particular fight, a lot. I developed an enormous network of people, both in the shadows and in public, that did a lot of work and are still doing a lot of work to preserve the integrity of the DoD. Get accountability for what took place in these legal actions that not only just damaged and exacted this moral injury on our service members who signed up to serve their country and then were destroyed by the same organization that was supposed to protect their constitutional rights as they were protecting the constitutional rights of other Americans. But what I will say is these groups are still very active, working hard. There are still lawsuits going. I think Pete Hegseth has been responsive to some of the things we pushed his way. We've seen a number of things coming out that he's within weeks of us putting stuff out on social media or getting things into him through back channels. He has responded to publicly in certain ways. So that makes me hopeful.
I feel like we're at this time right now where it's like a good content game, good, like, you know, with the power and the virality of social media. Like, if some of these stories just, I don't think are you know, receive the attention that they somewhat deserve, and sometimes it can be because of packaging a little bit.
Yeah.
Sure.
So real quick, Sam, are there some groups, are there some accounts on X that we should put out there to our audience and that we should be following to stay up on this issue?
Yeah, I mean, off the top of my head, I'll say follow Jordan Carr for one. Jordan Carr, Karr. She's been one of the most vocal and effective proponents for military advocacy and accountability in the DoD, and she has been relentless. There's so many other people working in these groups. You know, we have active duty service members. I'd say Rob Green. He is an active duty commander in the Navy, 05 type, and he has been relentless in his pursuit of justice. A lot of other strong military figures, but I'm speaking specifically to those seeking accountability. Carolyn Rocco, I couldn't tell you what her name is, but she's a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force who, another just phenomenal voice. Go follow Lieutenant Colonel Teresa Long. She's a doctor I was telling you about who was the whistleblower for medical data in the DoD. And they tried to ruin her life. I mean, you've never seen anything like it. And she actually was just by name requested by the Secretary of Defense to stay in uniform. He came to her personally because she was retiring, and he said, I want you to stay because I want to pursue what's going on with this medical data and figure out what took place, what issues there are in DMED, and fix this for sake of national security. Yeah, I mean, right there. You need to be following her if you care about our military and what took place over the last several years. And she's tied in herself with Bobby Kennedy and is in that network of people. So
good. Quick question. So Bobby recently announced that all new vaccines going forward are going to require placebo-controlled studies. That's good news. I don't know the details, and often the devil's in the details, but do you know if that by default from HHS extends to DoD policy?
Well, see, this is the thing. DoD policy is controlled under US Code 1107 Alpha. The whole reason this was unlawful is because 1107 Alpha dictates that the only person who can waive informed consent is the President of the United States if he deems that the threat to national security is greater than that of the individual service member. So basically, you have to be at conflict in an area where he says, okay, the danger is more important than your immediate safety of taking this experimental vaccine. Otherwise, you cannot, without that waiver from the president, and President Biden did not mandate this. See, this is important to understand. The memo came from the Secretary of Defense, and the Secretary of Defense stated in his memo that it will be administered by an FDA-approved vaccine. When they came out with the Pfizer vaccine, they approved it on August 23rd, and they immediately removed its biological licensing agreement on the same day. So not only did they remove the BLA licensing the same day they approved it, but they never produced an FDA-approved vaccine. Pfizer specifically said that they were not going to produce it, and we have all the written statements and audio from them, but they said they were not going to produce it while they had all this stock of EUA. Because if you remember in 2021, they built up massive amounts of stock of the BioNTech vaccine. And so when Comirnaty was approved, it was never made because they had so much stock of EUA, and Pfizer wasn't trying to hide anything. They specifically said, hey, we're not getting into this with the DoD. They are legally distinct vaccines. And Terry Yadram, who was the Defense Health Agency's, the director of the Defense Health Agency at the time, she came out with a memo in September after there were a lot of questions about it. And she said the two vaccines can be used interchangeably. And then she said they will be used interchangeably. to fulfill the mandate. That's illegal. We know it's illegal. It's been ruled on in at least half a dozen court cases that it's illegal. So the law was violated with this memo, and everything under the Secretary of Defense, so that's all of the service branches, violated every service member's rights by forcing them to get an EUA vaccine. The law was broken soundly across the board for everyone. They were never given informed consent, and they were never given an FDA-approved vaccine. And every single person who refused to take it was within their legal right to do so. They didn't have to get a religious accommodation or a medical exemption or any of those things because it was already unlawful to force them to take an EUA drug, according to US Code 1107 Alpha. So it's already encoded in our laws, but they violated that just across the board, and nobody has answered for it as of yet. Nobody.
And it was relentless too.
Yes.
So the push, and like I mean, I'm sure you've seen all the footage, as many people have seen, but there was forced vaccinations placed on individuals and troops. Is just like horrible. And now that things have shifted, am I wrong to think that there was like a reinstatement of people that were discharged or released?
So they've just come out with this, and they've been jockeying this around for several months, and this is where a lot of people are frustrated because there's a lot of malicious compliance within the military. The Secretary of Defense has been stating all of these things, talking about getting rid of DEI and woke and transgenders and all that stuff, which I'm not even going to talk about. That's a whole different issue. But there's been a lot of malicious compliance from the JAG Corps and from command teams across the military to refuse to comply, or to comply in a way. So just straight up non-compliance or malicious compliance, where they comply in such a way where it smears egg on the current administration's face and makes them look bad. Specifically with like DEI, where they had the websites where they're like removing Tuskegee airmen because they were black. And they were like, well, you told us to get rid of DEI. I'm like, no, you know what you're doing. You're purposely making the administration look like they're racist by removing black. He didn't say get rid of black people or get rid of women from websites. That's not what was said. He said get rid of DEI policies, which is completely different. So a lot of malicious compliance, especially from the JAG Corps.
Is 45 body mass index inclusion.
Right, exactly.
That's the core of it.
So a lot of this stuff has slow rolled, and so many people, even the ones who have agreed to come back in, which is I have literally talked to in all of my military networks, only 3 people who have said they want to come back in. And these are usually people who just want to finish out their careers because they were close to retirement, but almost unanimously. And I will even conservatively say at least 95%, but I would liberally say probably 99% of the troops that were kicked out have no desire to come back in. Their rights were violated. They were lied to. The organization, like I said, that was supposed to protect the Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic, completely violated their constitutional rights and what was written in law. And they said, I don't want to come back to this. I don't want to come back to an organization that did this. And so you have this moral injury that has crushed these service members. But then on top of the 8,700 who were kicked out for this, there's 100,000 more that resigned their commissions or just got out because they said, I don't want to be a part of this joke anymore. This is a complete joke. And the entire idea behind this is, if you're going to force somebody to break the law for their own bodily autonomy, then what's going to stop you from forcing them to commit a war crime? And when they say no, throw them in jail or do something else to them. If you're willing to break the law as the Department of Defense in one area, then you're willing to break it in another area if you can morally justify it or somehow ethically justify it as a means to an end. And that's what people are afraid of. They say the DOD has to exist within the parameters of what Congress has established in law. And if they're not willing to do that, then there's no constraints. And it's just a matter of time until somebody comes into power in the DOD and this corrupt general officer corps that does something against its own citizenry or against another nation. And right now we're seeing a lot of stuff overseas that we're supporting that people are questioning. there's a lot of very questionable stuff wherever you fall politically. And I don't want to get into that because everybody's all over the board with Gaza and Ukraine and all these other things, but there's a lot of questionable stuff that we are supporting. And I say, at what point do we get involved and we start doing the same things that we're seeing overseas? And I'm not talking about warfare, but I'm talking about these human rights violations that are absolutely egregious in some cases. So,
yeah, and it's
I want to
really
revisit
sad.
the community. Go ahead, Kyle. I wanted to go over the community thing that you brought up because I don't know that a lot of people understand that, and I just want to get your take on this and if it gels with what my understanding.
Sorry, Billy, but before we go into that, I just want just a quick point on what we just mentioned there, and that is the 99% of people not wanting to come back. That those 99% are like the people that probably need to come back more than
you're right.
And it's that's where that is where there was serious honor and integrity and values that trumped the going along with complying with things that many understood that was wrong. And then there's likely also now a sect of people who all took it all and still are believing or still are kind of like, following that dogma and just, it's like continue to take the blue pills, if you will, and will support, a nefarious agenda or this, as you said, malicious compliance.
Yeah. Well, I'll respond to that really quickly. Sorry, Billy, just to respond to what he said really quick is that, people have made that argument that those are the people that need to stay in. And if we don't have those people come back in, or we don't have those people in the force now, then all we're going to get are the rotten ones, the bad ones that continue to drive our military into the ground. And I think that's a valid argument. But at the end of the day, if you understand how the military is structured, it doesn't matter how good of a person you are or commander you are or anything else. You can affect your small little pocket within the military, and you go up in rank, be a battalion commander or, a brigade commander, and you affect more and more troops. But at the end of the day, the people who call the shots are the general officers. Bar none, we are a top-down driven organization. And until the general officer corps is cleaned out from the people that have really just destroyed our military over the last 15 years. It goes much further than 4 years, but until those people are cleaned out and held to account for what they've done and the decisions they've made and they've pushed down on their troops, you can have all the good guys in the world at the bottom. It will not change what is coming from the top.
And what's it going to take to actually do that? Like, one is getting rid of them. The other is getting justice and accountability of the actions.
There's a lot of different opinions on that. But honestly, I think what Hegseth is doing right now by claiming that he's going to either remove 20% of the flag officer positions or the flag officers themselves, I'm not sure which he's actually claimed. Either way, 1/5 of flag officer positions or flag officers is a huge number. And currently, a lot of names are being brought forth to the Department of Defense, specifically to Hegseth and his team, on bad actors who need to be removed. So hopefully he follows through with that and we start to see some of those removals.
And with technology and with history as well, I mean, with characters like Elon and just knowing where we are, it feels like it shouldn't be that hard to identify, the rotten apples.
Well, we have receipts for days because these people put all of their opinions and all of their conjecture in emails and everything else because they were so proud of themselves for violating service members' rights. And they were so proud of themselves in a lot of regards for going after individuals and making their life hell and destroying them in cases that I don't have time to tell you about right now because we just don't have the bandwidth in this podcast. But I'm telling you, vindictive, evil stuff done by a lot of these general officers and their subordinate commanders. But we have receipts on them. And then, on top of that, somebody made the comment earlier, and they're right. In a lot of cases, all you have to do is just hold these general officers to height and weight standards in a lot of cases, and that'll clean out the force right there by itself. Because it's not just the lower ranks who have gotten bad. There's a lot of fatties running around wearing stars right now. General Milley.
Why do you think the flag officers did that? Why do you think they did that? Why do you think they did that? Is it was just a for their career, why would people in the military force this down on people?
All right, so you have to understand the climate, and this is the argument I've made. You have to understand the climate at the time. The climate, if you'll recall, was death, death, death. The pandemic is the scariest thing ever. We have to do everything. Put on your mask. 6 feet of distancing. The whole world's going to end. What are we going to do? And so this entire climate just ripped through the military like a hurricane. I know factually that some of the biggest proponents in the general officer ranks for the COVID vaccine originally made comments like, "This is so dumb. I can't believe we're doing this. This is a flu. This is the sniffles. I can't believe but they had to comply because what was coming down from the Biden administration was compliance across the entire federal government. So better get on board or you're going to lose your job. So you had this whole air of comply, comply, comply. Well, general officers, if you understand what they are innately, is they are there to protect the institution above all else. A lot of really bad actions take place because general officers are there to protect the institution. But then their secondary function is to protect the general officer corps. So they huddle together and they protect their own, but then they protect the institution. So when this was, you will carry water and you will hold the line on COVID bad, get the vaccine, this above all else was the priority and the tasking that was just, do you want to make it to the next level? Do you want to survive in this world? Do you want to be a part of the military industrial complex when you retire? Do you want to have that high paying 6-7 figure salary when you get out? Do you want to be a player, or do you want to pack everything you've done for the last 30 years and get out now? Because if you don't hold the line and carry forward with this way of thinking and this mandate, then you're done. We don't want you. And so you had JAG that came out, and JAG built their entire premise off this memo by Terry Adram that the vaccines could be used interchangeably. So all of the legal rulings were handed over to general officers, and these general officers across the board said the Department of Defense's stance on the COVID-19 vaccine is that it's lawful. It's lawful. It's lawful. That's why you still hear it today. Lawful, lawful. They'll say the service members who refused the lawful vaccine mandate, and they make sure they throw that word into everything, lawful, because it's propaganda. Say it enough times, say it over and over and over, so we can let everybody know they were the ones who broke the law, not us. And that's what it comes down to. It comes down to a groupthink. It comes down to an institutional protection. And it comes down to, you just gave 30, 35, maybe even 40 years of your life to something. And you're a big man. You've got stars on your chest. You got stars on your shoulder. Do you want to keep playing ball, or do you want to get out right now? Because you're gone. You will go away if you don't hold the line and push this through.
I mean, that was not isolated to the military. The entire world was attacked by this radical division and this mass formation psychosis placed on it. And across all the different doctors, nurses, policemen, firefighters, it just goes on and on and on and on and on. And, ultimately, one of the things Bobby was saying, he was part of the disinformation dozen. And one of the things that the COVID epidemic or the pandemic or whatever you want to call it, the scenario did was it identify the people who are willing to stand up and stand really true to it. And, now, again, there's receipts for the action. Now, I have a question too about within the military, who's actually delivering and deploying and monitoring all of these injections, because that's got to be a separate set. And I would imagine they're working very closely with pharmaceutical companies on the data, because this was from my perspective, this was the world's largest live trial of this experimental technology that we've ever seen. So there are receipts there too.
Yeah. So in the summer of 2021, massive, we call them rodeos. vaccine rodeos. That's what we call them in the military. So when you're about to deploy, you'll go through a vaccine rodeo and you'll get all your injections. The whole unit gets their injections, all this stuff. Across the entire DoD, they had these massive vaccine rodeos where basically they shut down entire huge buildings of whatever it used to be. Now it's this, and they were just funneling soldiers through like cattle. And you would get your vaccine card, and then but at the same time, a lot of people were buying fake vaccine cards. They were having their friends fill them out. And there was so little control on this that nobody knew if you got your vaccine card at Walgreens. Obviously, if you got it on post, it was easy to track. But other than that, there was so much fake stuff going on. We had the rings out of New York City that were selling, cards and ended up getting arrested and all that stuff. It was a crazy time. So the same thing happened in the military. A lot of people had their vaccine, but not really, because they had fake cards. And then a lot of people refused it. Not a lot, but enough at the time. And then when the pressure started to build on them, more and more took it because they didn't want to end their careers. But soundly, it was mass chaos. And basically the only way you could control it was, here's your card and keep hold of it, because you're going to have to input it with your medic at your unit. So.
And what about like the upper echelons? Like, because I'm a firm believer that like the majority of the injections were saline, and like just from a safety point of view, and also like the live tracking. And this was like one of the things about the in Germany when the H5N1 years ago, the whole program got stopped when it was clear that they were Parliament had special batches, if you will. So I just don't think leadership that really there's too much risk, but amongst the troops,
I'm going to actually disagree with you on that, because I don't think general officers are special in that regard. And I'll tell you why. I wrote one story, for instance, on a 2-star Marine Corps general. He got a vaccine injury. And before he got a vaccine injury, now you got to keep in mind, this guy's reputation, I believe he had deployed 5 times, and he was known as a gunslinger. Like, he was a hardcore Marine infantryman, major general. He was a Marine through and through. And everybody who knew him or had served underneath him had nothing but adulation for him. When this all went down, he was one of the most ruthless people about ending Marines' careers out there. Well, he ended up getting a vaccine injury, damaged his heart. This is a true story told by a colonel who had permission to speak on his behalf. Okay, this was on Newsmax. I ended up writing an article about it after the fact. But this Marine Corps general, he was a major general, went to a conference where there were, all the other Marine Corps generals were there and everything else. And at the time, General Berger came up to him personally and said, keep your mouth shut. I don't want you telling your story to anybody, because I don't want there to be vaccine hesitancy in the ranks. Legit, true. He ended up retiring, but he was ordered by the Commandant of the Marine Corps to not talk about his vaccine injury. Guess what happened to the Commandant in the Marine Corps, the currently serving Commandant in the Marine Corps a year and a half ago? He had a heart attack. Okay, so people will go, oh, he's an old man. He's 55 years old. Well, he is also an incredibly physically fit Marine Corps general, Commandant, without any history or background of anything related to this whatsoever. And he had a heart attack that sidelined him, along with numerous other vaccine-related injuries amongst general officers that are not as severe as those incidents. But I do know personally that there are several general officers who had life-altering events because of these vaccines. And yeah, I don't think they were special.
I mean, my question would be, were they given those vaccines on base, or did they go to the Walgreens?
Good question. That's a great question. Because
if that really kind of comes down to that notion, if there are special ones. But I just think this placebo, you have to have a placebo out there in order to really understand this.
You're right.
If they're perfecting this technology in the long scale, massive investment. If you actually go back to thinking, if you want to connect the dots to anthrax. Like this is going on a long time. And yes, like, and as you're testing, like, man, there's going to be bad reactions. There've been so many bad reactions. So many good people, were murdered as a result of this. And, and there's no informed consent, and it was forced. And so, from my point of view, that qualifies as genocide.
100%.
We're talking about like, 100,000 people in a faraway land right now as genocide. And that was the word. But look, we had literally 10 billion injections across the planet, and we can't use that word. Oh, that's a bad word.
You start to think it's nefarious when you one thing that happened, and I can't remember if it happened with the military or where it exactly happened, but I know the military fell right in lockstep, and that was they removed natural immunity, and it's something Peter McCullough and a number of other doctors talked about. Was that talked about within the military? Did you guys talk about the
100%.
natural immunity? Because you guys, the military was definitely one of those things. It was part of your core. The core is you get natural immunity, you don't take the vaccine. It was part of the military. What was the take on that within the military?
Well, anecdotally, I spoke to dozens of service members who did this very thing. So one of the things I did on my page, and I was at the forefront of this, not on my X account, but on an Instagram page that I ran under a pseudonym at the time, along with several other folks, was we were exposing all of this information, everything else. And one of the things we did talk about was natural immunity. And we were bringing, as this stuff was entering the knowledge space of the public and being suppressed by COVID and Facebook, or Google and Facebook and all the other outlets, we were getting this out on Telegram and anywhere else we could get this out. But we did talk about natural immunity. And I know firsthand that several dozen troops that I spoke to took this information, peer-reviewed information that they took to their commanders, and they said, look, let me show you. And just at that point, it was just shut up. The order is this, either get it or we're going to ruin your life. You're getting out. And it was crushed at every level. All of these discussions, doctors couldn't have this discussion. If you did not say that the vaccine was safe and effective as a medical provider, you were done, let alone speaking out against it. Just not saying that it was safe and effective. You were crushed and silenced for your dissent. And that was across the military, across the federal government, that's how it was handled. Yeah.
Do you think Bill Gates took the jab?
No.
just had to ask.
King Charles didn't take the jab. Bill Gates didn't take the jab. All the people on the Epstein list didn't take the jab. It's there's folks who do.
Yeah.
But there are, even in the high circles, there's idiots that also did take the jab, and their parents and the families, and like, oh God.
So listen, you're talking about how there had to be a placebo. Well, if you look at bad lots, that's the case. And I've never been shy from this. I got every vaccine that was known to man when I came in the military, and I didn't think anything about it. So when the vaccine came out, well, it's not a vaccine, it's a therapeutic, but whatever. We'll keep calling it vaccine for the sake of this. But when it came out, I got it in March. I got it because I didn't think anything about it. And I fought back against it because when they mandated it and it was no longer your choice, I knew it was illegal. I said, you're breaking the law. And so I became a huge advocate for service members to fight back against what the DOD was doing. But I got it myself, and I was vaccine injured myself. So my lot ended up on one of the safer lots. Regardless, though, I got shingles that ripped up the whole side of my face and got into my eye and almost lost my eyesight. And I remember when I went to I saw 3 separate doctors, 2 ER doctors, and then my normal medical provider. And all 3 of them asked me, because I was 37, I think it was 37 at the time. They said, do you have an autoimmune disorder? And I was like, well, mother effer, I didn't, but I sure as hell do now. Thanks. Yeah, I probably do have an autoimmune disorder. Thanks. I hope it's not AIDS. Please don't be the fun one that's running around. So that was my own personal experience with it. But Yeah. Anyways, just thought I'd share that fun little story with you.
Thank you, Sam. Let's tie a bow on those injections and therapeutics, and just move on, because one of the other things I want to talk about is food safety within the military, because that is, I've heard from multiple people. I was at a Turning Point conference in Phoenix and was talking to someone who lobbies on behalf of veterans and military men, saying that the food quality, there's a security challenge with the food that's on a lot of American bases right now. Does that resonate?
Yeah. So we just found out, and this is stuff that you can easily Google, but this was exposed in the news as well. We just found out that the military was withholding hundreds of millions of dollars from service members that they were supposed to be giving to them in BAS or even on their meal card. And we don't know where it went. We don't know what it was going to. But basically, one of the issues we've had in the military for the whole time I've been in is quality control when it comes to either portion control or the actual quality of the food itself. And one of our favorite things to do in the military across all the military social media channels is to show, the egregious undercooked chicken or the ridiculous couple of noodles and lima beans you get on your plate or something to that effect. But we've had these issues where service members are basically getting shut down on various installations because the dining facilities on these installations are closing early, or they don't have enough food. They're running out of food. And at the end of the day, it comes down to this: good food is expensive, and the military has not been managing the money for this stuff properly. And like I said, recently, within the last 4 months, this article came out that showed that the DOD had basically been doing something else with the money that was supposed to be going to service member and their food. And who knows? So all these thousands of troops that are screaming because they're hungry and they're starving, and they have to go pay out of pocket to go get Taco Bell down the street. And keep in mind, fast food is all over these military installations.
Yeah, it's on the bases.
It's crazy the amount of fast food you can get. There aren't healthy options. You can go into these kiosks they've set up now, and it's just garbage after garbage after garbage. Saturated food, high sodium, tons of sugar, and that's what you get. That's what you survive on. Now, a healthy service member who's doing PT can do all right, but we're seeing less PT. We're seeing more obesity. We're seeing less good food, and all of these lines of effort are kind of crowding in to create this atmosphere of just not a healthy environment within the military. And you'll find pockets. That's the thing. The military is not all one and the same. All the branches are very different. So I would say, routinely speaking, the Marine Corps is going to be your healthiest, most physically fit branch by a mile. But then you're going to go down to the Army, and the Army is going to have pockets. So like the 82nd Airborne Division, Ranger Regiment, Special Forces, specific elements that are more physically fit than others. But as you start to get out into these support elements, and then you start getting out into these just less disciplined, less controlled areas, it starts to become more degraded. You start to have less quality control, less discipline, and all these things factor into health issues in the military.
Mm-hmm. And to extend a little beyond that, I've heard that in some states, they've actually contracted with the military to provide food for the public school system. And they're getting the bad food from the military in even worse condition than the military had it. Moldy, like literally moldy.
That's
kind of
sad.
like rat shit in it.
Yeah.
So I was really curious about the situation as you know it with food in the military.
I'm not familiar with that. I haven't heard of that. I'm not saying it's not happening, because but
and what's the food security though? I feel like are there gardens? Is there any actual food production that takes place on any of these places?
Everything comes in canned. Everything comes in canned and in bags. So you got to think of this as
local sourcing,
production. No.
Camp Pendleton in San Diego, there's delicious, great, healthy food all around. they're just getting like straight through the big government contractors in cans, mass produced shit food.
Right. And it's an assembly line. It's an assembly line that has become less and less controlled over the years. And you know, I've learned a lot because logistics is a very hard business. It is. And with mass populations like we have in the military or anywhere else, you got to look at an organization like Amazon and just be in awe of what they do. It's incredible. But the military does logistics bar none better than any other military in the world. Without any hesitation, I say our military is far better than any other military in the world when it comes to logistics. But even that, I don't think it's a matter of our capability. I think it's a matter of our priorities and our desire, because you have a culture where the service member is not the priority for these people. It is that military industrial complex contract. It is that effort that's overseas. It's doing something other than providing for that service member. And so, yeah, you have a lot of well-intentioned people that want to do this, but they're not afforded the ability because the powers that be at the highest levels, they're focused on everything else, and they could care less about the troops. I'll tell you right now, the Pentagon does not have a clue what happens in the regular formations in the military. They are as lost as any civilian out there because they are so buried in the beltway of DC with their priorities and everything else they're doing. So,
do you think the military could grow its own food if it has the skills to be able to take on that challenge?
I think the military could be the greatest force for good in every aspect of this country if it wanted to. In fact, one of the things I've wanted to do for years was we have service members sitting around doing nothing all the time on these installations. Why don't we take those service members and have them go out into the communities and do stuff and work and make this country better? But you can't do that because that violates Title 10 or 50 or whatever the title is with federal troops doing anything within, on U.S. soil. So you have these issues that we could overcome if we cut through some of the red tape and did something different. But the same thing goes to growing our own food. We have so much time on our hands. We have the ability to take these what I consider mostly these incredible Americans who raise their right hand to serve their country and do an amazing thing for their country, who unfortunately get hammered on by an environment that is often toxic when they join it, but they want to do the right thing. So why don't we do something different while they're sitting on their ass every day doing nothing and have them be a force for good in this country in all these different ways? Yes, they could.
It seems by design. If you really look at the medical industrial complex, hospitals, I mean, you go in there for pretty much anything, and they're giving you food loaded with sugar, food loaded with carbs, food loaded with GMO, glyphosate, corn, wheat, soy, just all GMO stuff, and it's weighing you down. When I lived in California, I wanted to know what was in our kids' food. So, we made lunch, we let them buy lunch. I go into the Board of Ed, ask what's in the kids' lunch. I just want to see the ingredients. I was not allowed to see it. It wasn't at the school. I had to call and make an appointment to go drive 30 minutes away to be able to look in a book and see what's in my kid's school. When I got there, they told me, there's no one here. We're not going to be able to show you. They're out today. And I sat there and I demanded to be able to go back there. They finally let me go back and look in that book. And I remember looking at it's the same thing. And since that day, my wife is amazing, and I help as well. But we've made food for our kids pretty much every day. I mean, I think maybe once or twice a semester they'll get something at school, but we're monitoring that. But and now the military, yeah, and then you have to look at the contractors. So military vets, service, active duty, they're getting crap food. But you look at the contractors, the companies we're paying, they're making triple the salary and getting gourmet food. Then you boil it down to 18 vets committing suicide a day. Where's the breakdown here? how do we fix this? Because I'm sitting here wondering if this is nefarious, if it's just money hungry,
Yes.
if it's domination of world population. Like, what is it? I mean, I don't want to be a conspiracy theory here, but at some point you have to wonder why these institutions are delivering us the stuff that is so bad for us.
So there's several factors in there, and you always have to look for the easiest answer in these cases. Occam's razor, or whatever, Occam's razor. Anyways, most of everything bad that takes place in these organizations, the contractor fraud that you said, charging, forget 3 times as much, try 20 times, 100 times as much, charging $2,000 for a niche item on an airplane that is $2 if you manufactured it in a 3D printing press. It's this pursuit of money. This is biblical, guys. The love of money is the root of most evil. This nothing new is under the sun here. This is just the reality of what we're dealing with. There are nefarious actors out there. There are people that want to do bad things, that want to take over the world, that want to destroy America, that want to destroy the military, whatever their occupation is. They know how to leverage the greed of the 95% of everyone else to their advantage to make all this stuff happen. And so that's what you're dealing with. For instance, if I point out child exploitation, which is something I've been involved in a lot, counter human trafficking involving children and everything else, you have a lot of people facilitating this along the way. You have judges, you have therapists, you have CPS, you have all these elements. Do they know firsthand that a child is being molested or being trafficked or something like that? No, they don't see this. They don't deal with that. Are they collecting a paycheck or a little stipend or a little something here and there to make to put some signatures on a piece of paper and move something around? Yeah, they're one element of facilitation, and they don't even need to know what the rest is. On the front end and on the back end are the evil people doing stuff, and they're using everything in between to facilitate that movement. It's just like this with everything else. So it's not this massive conspiracy where all these people are collaborating and they have some secret network over on Signal somewhere where they're talking. You just have to leverage the natural desire of man's greed and his desire to get rich and throw him some bones. This guy can make this thing move for you, so let's give him some money to make it move. That's all it is. But there are bad people out there that are making those movements within that supply chain.
Yeah, and there's also just an element too of centralization. Like over time, the more centralized systems become, the more secretive and the more corrupt they become.
That's correct.
We're dealing with we're at a very strongly polarized pyramid system, and I believe that that pyramid ultimately will dissolve over the next couple decades. And the solutions will come about because we have all the capacity in the world. We have all the knowledge, all the technology, and the human will to overcome these challenges. And it just is going to require the light of some transparency and some accountability and some responsibility and justice. I have to be wary about the concept of like justice for everybody, like that. The person that necessarily like signed off in the middle, like the cogs within it, it's going to be very difficult. There's so many people like participated in it, maybe slightly willingly, like knowing like the core was wrong, but we can't like there is an element of, okay, like we all got hoodwinked. A lot of people fucked up. Like some people who are really nefarious, like justice, needs to be served. Like people like Tony Fauci and his handlers. Like there's blood on the water. There's receipts. Like goodness gracious. Let's go, Cash. Let's go, Pam. What are we waiting for here? Right. But there also needs to be, and this is where I hope Bobby can come through and be like, okay, we have to rethink. I'll use the word reset, even though that's like a triggering word, but like try to solve the problems, understand what our ideal outcomes are, understand the challenges, and start building the solutions and integrating the solutions towards fixing this. And some of that's easy. Like you said, like a $2,000 part that can be machine milled, like, you know, in the hangar with some basic equipment. Fuck, like, let's go.
Right.
Let's go. Like growing gardens. I mean, Johnny's been quiet, but he's here. His entire life force is dedicated towards food safety and food gardens and making America healthy again through food.
Yeah, let's beat our swords into plowshares, man. We can turn these bases into great places for gardens. You know,
I'm all about it. Let's do it.
let's do it, man.
And same with our veterans as well. Like, you know, there's like so many good veterans, like the VA.
Yes.
Gosh, like let's shine some light onto that and how the pharmaceutical companies are just reaping ridiculous profits by keeping people in a state of perpetual addiction and sickness. And like, you know, for a lot of I lived in San Diego, and that probably has one of the highest levels of like homeless veterans, you know, in the world. And you can see the minds are disconnected and they're lost, but there's like, you know, there's a lot of heart and a desire and a huge willingness to do, but they got cast out. Like, so a lot of people that might be injured or might have PTSD or like, you know, are removed. All of a sudden they go from a life of hierarchy, order, command, structure to like later.
Yeah.
Like,
Lost.
and here's where you can get your drugs that are going to keep you in a placated sense. And then there's nothing there. And I think, like, you know, the veterans of America are one of the greatest untapped resources of like beautiful heart, like patriotic passion and energy.
You're correct.
And experience and knowledge and execution ability towards helping solve a lot of these problems. It's just about we need to stop, or the system as a society recognize are they just going to be fodder, like profit centers for the pharmaceutical complex, or are they going to be profits, or are they going to be, you know, gigantic value generators for the American dream?
Well, you're not worth the money that Pfizer's willing to pay, and that's what it comes down to. And it's sad because I couldn't agree more. I have to be very clear when I have these conversations, and I'll say it multiple times throughout, but I am a huge advocate for troops. I was one, and service members by and large sign up to do the right thing. There's all kinds of motivations. You know, it might be school, it might be a bonus, it might be just bored with life, don't want to go to college, whatever the case is. But by and large, they join up to support and defend their country and do something bigger than themselves. And they are a force for good. It is not their fault that they are hamstrung by a greedy corporatocracy and defense industry that wants to make money off of their blood and sweat. You know, that's not what they signed up for. They were lied to and betrayed in a lot of those regards. But the things we could do with those people and the impact that these highly motivated individuals have on their country when they come out and they join the corporate world and when they go into private business or whatever it is astounding. And we saw it specifically after World War II. You know, the best our country had to offer. We need to marry up the military and our nation once again. Our nation cannot abandon the DOD and our military and just allow them to be led by their own vices, because what we've seen is this almost shadow government build up in the military, this environment that lacks accountability, that Congress doesn't want to touch. I can tell you firsthand, Congress is terrified to exact accountability within the DOD because these general officers are so powerful. They are tied into the defense industry, which lobbies millions of dollars to Congress every year for their own campaigns. So all of this stuff is greased with a lot of money. And if America gave two shits about the DOD and the military at large, then we could probably get some get some light shed on what's going on, and we could stop having issues like fighting in the desert for 20 years and then finding out, oh, we did it for nothing. Oh, these general officers were lying to Congress the whole time, and all those rosy updates that they were giving to Congress every couple of years about Afghanistan were just lies and were just made up. That type of stuff. You wouldn't have those issues if more people were involved with the military and it wasn't just some thing that was over here on the side and people don't really care about. So it's a cultural issue. A lot of this is cultural. Anyways, stop my rant on that one.
I mean, I go ahead, Johnny.
You're
I
muted.
just want to rant. I just want to rant real quick about, how we're getting sold out. The lobbying going to Congress each year is like 500 million. The tax receipts, are like 4 trillion. So, it's like we're getting sold out for like 1% of like what we're paying into the government to these so-called public servants who are just, just selling us out. We just got to demand a whole lot better. So my thanks goes to you, Sam, and everybody just raising awareness on these issues and not letting them get away with it. This is exactly what we got to keep on doing.
I want to highlight the industrial complexes that are making America and the world not healthy, not sane, and not okay. I want to highlight them because it's been on my mind over this last couple of years as I've gotten deeper into this in COVID, and it's what really brought me out of being in this on my own and really trying to help others become informed. These industrial complexes I first learned about listening to speeches. I love speeches and debates, and I know I say this a lot, but I know some people don't get to hear it. Eisenhower, in his last speech as president in 1961, mentioned the military-industrial complex and mentioned the scientific elite, the technocrats in that speech. It's amazing. I don't think he could ever imagine that we would have this number of industrial complexes, and I'll just list a couple of them. There's the medical, banking, foodstuff, pharma, military, intelligence, energy, media, tech, academic, big data, and prison. These industrial complexes, there's probably more too, but these industrial complexes are somehow, we have to fight together and bring them down. I don't know how, but I think we start here, and we start with you, Sam, and we start with people like you.
Let me tell you something. I am the chief operating officer currently for 2 organizations. One is Our Country, Our Choice, and the other is Republic. Now, I'm not trying to blow up my organizations, but what I do want to talk about is what we're trying to accomplish with OCOC and Our Country, Our Choice. So what we want to do is create a safety network, a security network in every county in the United States. One of the things I've been successful doing before I came to this organization was helping stand up a security network in one of the counties that I was close to. We're talking about telecommunications, medical, tying in with law enforcement, having a deeper understanding of the area in case, everything hits the fan. We can deputize people. We can have comms when everything goes down. All these different aspects, so we can have food stored, so that we can have areas designated to protect our own, and all these different things. We want to establish and create that across the entire United States. And part of that is getting back into local community. And that is what we're focused on as an organization. And that's what Republic will do. We're going to, it's a new social media platform coming out with an app next month. And I know I'm doing a lot of stumping. It sounds like I'm selling an ad here, but what we're doing is we want people to start being activists in their local community. Stop focusing on the Fed. The Fed is gone. It's gone. There is nothing we can do to bring them back from the $1 billion, the $1 trillion, whatever it is that they have been lost in. It is gone. We cannot affect that, but you can affect your local community. And that's where we need to be focused on your sheriff, on your mayor, on your city council, on these things that actually matter. What affects you every single day? It's the pothole outside your neighborhood. When you hit that pothole every day, it does damage to your car. And you're like, why isn't this getting fixed? But you're over here on X typing about how Trump is stupid or about how Biden is stupid. Is that fixing the pothole in your road? This is where we need to focus on local community, on fixing our towns, our cities, our communities, and making life better for our families. Because right now, people are focusing on all the wrong stuff. The Fed is gone. That's what I want to be a part of. And that's actually why I joined this organization in the first place, because I liked where their focus was. And you're right. Like, we have to do something. So let's not keep attacking the problem head on where we can't win, the bulkhead, which is the federal government, and not saying that we completely forget about it. I know people are doing work there as well, but hey, what can you do? You can get involved in your local community. You can start keeping people accountable. You could take Doge, which is beautiful and brilliant and is a great concept, and bring it to your local community. How is your city council spending your tax dollars? That type of stuff. We need to be focused on the health of our communities, on the safety, on crime, on what is your chief of police, is he doing his job? Is he actually doing something about these issues in crime in your, whatever the case may be with you in your area, let's fix it. That's where we need to be.
Said. Our country, our choice.
All right.
Public.us. Dude, Sam, this is amazing. I had a feeling that tonight was this was going to be, because these are topics that I'm insanely passionate about, and like have so much desire towards like this systemic change. And I believe as well that, like, with Bobby Kennedy and with the leadership, there are well intentions, and they can, but they keep, like, Bobby can't do it alone. That was really clear. It's like, he can't do it alone. He's just one man. He needs the rest of support, but he can also be like, I'm going to pray that I'm going to send this to Bobby and pray that he watches this and goes over this and shares and learns and integrates like some of these discussions, because we've talked about, like, the issues, and it's really important to understand the challenges that we're facing, and the injustice and the trauma and the dastardly devilishness that's taken place. But we also must focus our energy on what is the solution that we want moving forward, and how do we fix that. And Our Country, Our Choice, and Republic.us, and this app, and more local engaged citizenry solving the problems, recognizing it, even within the military. Like, we're not doing anything. There's this dry patch over there. Let's build a fucking garden. Let's bring in some 3D printers. Like, let's do this. Let's not use our phones for a while. Like, let's just put those things down. Like, because we're getting sucked into that same social media waste zone.
Yep.
That just occupies like brain space and puts people into like the technocratic trance, if you will, and disconnects them from that source energy. So it's one step at a time.
One step at a time.
Just keep going and spreading the awareness. Just keep on keeping on. Like, Rome wasn't built in a day, and like this situation will not be solved tomorrow. A lot of people had expectations that, on January 21st, everything will come out.
Right.
And we hope that, but that's not the way that things work. It's going to take time towards unraveling this, but also, like, just recognizing, like, you can't fix a system by fighting it. If you want to truly change something, build new models that make the existing system simply obsolete. And that is how we overcome these institutions. And that is like, that I would say is like kind of the parting words for tonight. And just want to say thank you so much, Sam. I'm going to share your thing. Everyone, please follow Sam. Stay tuned with him. Share this. This episode, we had talked about so many different amazing things, from the vaccines to to the food, to the state, to the security, to, oh gosh, I mean, I don't want to cut out in the first stuff we talked about, because everything that we talked about as soon as Sam got on here was just incredible. And I look forward to clipping and sharing, and would encourage anybody out there, if you have some extra time, please review this. And if you know how to do clipping and sharing, please do that. because these are some tidbits, and content is king, and it is our solution. I look forward to Ian, who wasn't here. I knew he would have loved to have been here, engaging and listening on this. And he will enjoy, reviewing this and then delving deeper. Unisont, understanding the structures behind.
Oh, I love to see Ian tackle Unisont. That would be beautiful.
Ian, you didn't show up tonight. Just tackle Unisont. Just let's look into this, because this is important stuff here. So Billy, Johnny, Damo, Sam, thank you so much. We'd love to, keep this conversation going in the X sphere, but also potentially back here at some later date. And let's just keep tracking and keep forging forward together. Let's grow.
Thank you, Sam. Really appreciate you coming out tonight, man.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Sam.
it.
All right.
Great.
Thank you, everybody. Oh, and I do want to give one plug too. So, this is Club Maha. If you want to support Club Maha, we're doing this out of the gracious of our heart. We're not being paid to do this. We don't have any financial contributions aside from our Patreon channel. We've also had a couple sponsors. I'd like to mention Sarva Organics and the Beef Initiative, who have been supporting us a little bit behind the scenes. But if you enjoyed this or want us to keep doing this, I encourage you to go to patreon.com/Club Maha, and for $5 or $10 a month, or what you can add more to it as well, just to help keep this thing rolling and growing and improving as we go. We appreciate that. No obligation, no expectation, simply an invitation. That's patreon.com/Club Maha. And if you want to get some merch, we've got our website, clubmaha.com, where you can also pick up some merch. That's another way to support it. But again, thank you all. Thank you so much, Sam. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Let's go. Let's grow. Let's make America healthy again. Let's make Earth great again. Ciao for now.
The sun on the field, the feeling I feel when I'm living my life for what's real. Make America healthy, feeling like it's time for a change. We're going back to common sense, making America healthy again. We're going back to common sense, making America healthy again. We're going back up healthy again.